What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Passion and Precision with myself and Jory. You all know from Jory Sports Stories. How are you doing, Jory?
I am doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm good. We both know like it's hot where we are. It's
Mhm.
Sunday. It's kind of a real laid back day. We normally do this on Fridays, but it's good to not skip a week or anything because just like talking sports with you, and we definitely have another episode filled with some good topics. So um, we'll definitely get into some NFL as I guess we say a star player on the Cowboys had a quote that's kind of sending shockwaves through Jerry World. We'll talk about the NBA where the draft just happened, so you'll get our thoughts on that, as well as the offseason, which I believe technically starts today, but we've already seen some moves. We got some, rumblings that we can discuss as well. And I feel like a normal thing, we get into the WNBA, talk about a few things there. We have our favorite coach of the Fever opening her mouth. She said something that I feel like we definitely have to deep dive into. And then we'll end it with a team in the WNBA that is dominating once again, even though somehow they might actually be flying under the radar a little bit. So, with that, let's go ahead and get started with the first topic. So, in Dallas, Malik Hooker, if you don't know, he's a star. Well, he's a well-known secondary player. Went on, I believe it was Keyshawn Johnson's podcast. They were talking about the Cowboys, their offseason, the guys that need to get paid. And Malik Hooker was basically like, well, okay, so I guess to back up a little bit. CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, Zach Martin, Micah Parsons, all looking for new deals. None of them have gotten one yet. So the question was posed to Malik Hooker during the conversation as to how the Cowboys should kind of operate with them. So the most notable thing that came out of it was he left Micah Parsons as the last one to get paid. He basically said stuff like he hasn't scratched the surface yet. So because of that, he wants like Parsons to understand that there's more to his game that he can bring. He kind of wants him to focus a bit more on football. As we all know, he has his own things outside with his podcast as well. And that just sent shockwaves through Cowboys fans and NFL fans alike. I mean, we're seeing like ex players come out trying to go at Malik Hooker for saying it. So, for you, Jory, I mean, do you have any issue with what Malik Hooker actually said?
Because it's the truth. But there's three ways that you can approach this. This is his honest opinion, and there's no direct harm meant towards Micah. I mean, Keyshawn asked the question. You could say that he kind of set him up for that, but that's neither here or there. Um, you can also look at it at the angle of Micah's actually starting to rub people the wrong way with his foolishness. I do take it there a little bit. Or maybe I'm just thinking ahead. Malik kind of knows what's happening in Dallas. He knows what type of days are coming towards Dallas, and he knows what's important to keep the team afloat. But like my biggest question is why say that though? Like with that type of question, I feel like the answer you should have said was, I feel like they all need to be paid. And stay out of it. Like, did you forget the cardinal rule? Stay out of somebody else's pockets. Especially that's your teammate. Not even that. They're locker mates. Their lockers are right next to each other. You know how weird that is? So it can come across as being a hater. At the same time, what he's saying is not a lie either. It's like but it's also a whole bunch of self-inflicted drama. Like this was so easily unavoidable. He didn't have to answer the question the way that he wanted him to answer it. And it's like the one part of his direct quote that I will say that I did take was a little inflammatory to me is when he said, if we're at work and the run game is terrible, but you're doing a podcast, what are you really caring about? That's inflammatory.
Yeah, and I feel like that comment kind of got to Parsons because Parsons came out and was like, "Bro, I do my podcast on off days. So what are you talking about?" So clearly that got to him. Like Parsons clearly cares about the podcast. I mean, what athlete doesn't have one at this point? But yeah, I'll let you continue.
And I'm like, we know Micah is sensitive. That was a little inflammatory. He didn't have to say that. He was just already
Yeah,
on a roll. But my biggest question to Malik Hooker is why? Why would you say this? Why would you cause this a whole bunch of nothing because you decided to go loose lips? Sometimes, do you think that sometimes some things are just better left unsaid, and everything you said was the truth, but it was better left unsaid coming from you, especially in your position. All the players got a damn podcast at this point, and some of them don't be talking about jack squat like Micah. I mean, I don't watch his podcast. He could be talking about stuff like that, but he's annoying to me because he gets he talks too much. He wants to know a little bit about everything, which I get. But sometimes he puts his own foot in his mouth without knowing jack squat, and that's the one part I don't like, and I don't listen to him for that reason.
yeah. I would kind of go along with Anthony's question. I don't even have an issue with the podcast necessarily. It's like it's his prerogative to do whatever he wants to do on his off days, as he put it. And kind of get back to Malik Hooker part of this. I mean, look, he obviously, I guess, broke the cardinal rule, like you said, Jory, talking about another man's pockets. I feel like he was just giving an honest answer, where that's kind of like a catch 22 in terms of being an athlete. Like as fans, we love when athletes give their honest opinion on stuff, but when you kind of do it this way, fans also look at it and say you could have said it a different way, or you could just gave like a cookie cutter answer, like, those are my teammates. I hope they all get paid, like you said. I think the crazy thing about it as well is when Parsons is playing well, it actually makes Hooker and the rest of the secondary's job a lot easier. And I don't know, maybe Parsons was taken back by that as another defender putting him last in terms of the pecking order, because those are supposed to be same side of the ball. They're supposed to work hand in hand. Now, on Hooker's part, if you look at it, and if the Cowboys were to go and sign CeeDee Lamb first, then go Zach Martin, and then go Dak, you would look at today's NFL and be like, okay, so you locked up your star receiver, your star lineman, and your quarterback. There's nothing wrong with doing business like that. It's just like you said in this case, it's like he kind of went out of his way to knock Parsons down a little bit. Also, like you said, Parsons has shown that he's a bit sensitive at times. So I don't know if Hooker's thinking like he's using this as some type of motivation or whatever. But I also think another part of like Parsons' response where he was like, he almost made it seem like it was kind of ironic that Malik Hooker went on to a podcast to talk about Parsons and the fact that Parsons should kind of focus on the podcasting part a little bit less. And, Micah said we are locker neighbors and everything like that. Why don't you just say it to my face? It's a very good question to raise. Why Hooker chose this platform to try to whatever his end game is. I mean, I guess another question would be, in terms of the upcoming season, like, is this as the title shows on there, trouble in Jerry world. Also,
This
as
is
Anthony put, your defense depends on one player. Hold on, who was Hooker? Enough said. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Jory.
Jerry's fault. You waited too long to pay Dak the first time, and now you're at an impasse and you can't do jack squat, and you're not going to do jack squat, which impairs your ability to pay everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
This is Jerry's fault. He knew this, some type of dysfunction was coming because it's a clown show. Dallas is always a clown show. No matter what they do, they manage to snatch a headline out of thin air just by being affiliated with the team. Had Malik said this and he was not a Cowboy, would it be a headline? No. But because you're that man's teammate, you're right next to his locker, you really could have just put this in a phone call.
Right.
Like, you really could have just said, I have a problem with you, and this season with hard feelings and low-key green-eyed envy or whatever you want to call it, because half of it did come off as hating. They should have just squashed it instead of just going on podcasts. And people are grounding Micah for defending himself on social media. No, I'm not getting on Micah for that part because Hooker took it there. He did it on podcasts. He didn't do it in private and Micah blasted it in public. No, he did it publicly. So Micah corrected him. Well, got offended publicly. Don't get mad at him for that. And I also think Diggs could be one of those ones that goes soon. Because he tweet like he don't really want to be there at times too.
Well, I mean, if you're Diggs and you're looking at the way Jerry's treating guys up for a contract, I can't see why it'd be all that appealing to necessarily stay there. Now, obviously, when you look at what the Cowboys are going through right now, we've seen teams have, some turmoil or some issues in the offseason, get to the regular season. If the wins are there, the story goes away. But clearly, with these two, as well as Lamb, Dak, and all these other guys, if they start off slow, everybody's looking at them, wondering what's going on. If they lose to a few teams like they're not supposed to, this issue right here is going to come back up. And we'll have to see what Jerry decides to do about it, as well as the others in the front office. Mike McCarthy also has to deal with this on the field as well. So I would say, for right now, Cowboys fans probably don't need to panic necessarily. But if they start out like 1-4 or something, yeah, start worrying. I mean, they should already worry, playoff wise and trying to win a Super Bowl. But just in terms of the roster makeup and this turning into a much bigger issue, which could completely implode the team, like Anthony, and as you said, Jory, like guys like Diggs would be looking at this like, nah, I think I'm good here. I'll just, whenever my chance is, I'll just up and leave and, yeah, be happier somewhere else. So it's definitely something that is worth watching as we get closer to, preseason and the regular season for sure. Do you have, something to add about this one before we move on?
Can y'all not do this right before training camp? We've been talking about your rest. Be quiet.
Yeah, the timing is horrific for this. All right, let's move on. All right, so we're going to the NBA. Up until a few hours ago, the Detroit Pistons did not have a coach. So that they went through the draft process with no coach. We literally have the summer league coming up in about a week and a half. They still had no coach. Luckily, this morning, they decided to go with JB Bickerstaff. If you don't know JB Bickerstaff, he was the coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers this year. They lose in the second round. He's dismissed. not too long after that. Didn't wait around too long because he ends up getting the Pistons job after it seemed like nobody really wanted this job. And I guess I could see why. Monty Williams signs a big deal last year. He's gone this year. They're paying him not to coach a bunch of money. I feel like the coach before him, they're still paying as well. Was that Dwayne Casey? I think he's still getting paid by Detroit. And now they bring in Bickerstaff. But looking at Bickerstaff, looking at the Pistons situation, like, is this a job that he really should want? And two, what do the Pistons have to do to make it successful for him? As Anthony says, I don't know how you have a draft without a head coach. You're setting the head coach up to fail. Does seem like a backwards way of doing it, but it's Detroit.
Pistons is that this is a putrid, dysfunctional organization that can never seem to make the right decisions. Hopefully, they make the right one with JD. He's a decent coach, but between the roster building and the front office of that team, which has been absolutely terrible. They've drafted all of these high picks. They've had numerous times in the lottery. They've drafted top 10 a few times, and they still haven't managed to turn that team around. They do nothing but waste talent at this point. So if Bickerstaff can find a way to cultivate whatever they have on that roster and make it, I don't even think his bar is going to be that high. At least win 30 games. I mean, 20 to be really low because they didn't do that last year. They won 14. 14 games in an 82-game season. They won 14. And I actually need the front office to be patient. Like, I understand Monty and his decisions, but you didn't really necessarily give the man a hairs of a chance to build the team the way he wanted to build it. Because it's not like you have good players, but you're unbalanced. They're extremely guard and forward heavy, and they don't have a lot of quality centers. Maybe one or two, but you need more. So Bickerstaff has his work cut out for him. But if they give him some time, we work the roster, I feel like they can at least be a little bit competitive. I'm not giving them that much hope, but they'll be more competitive.
I kind of think that's going to be his first task is how does he make this team competitive? We know their roster construction, very young. I feel like where Monty got in trouble, obviously, was, well, I guess it kind of boiled down to the Killian Hayes over Jaden Ivey stuff. Like that obviously was a terrible decision, which ultimately cost him. So now that Killian Hayes is kind of removed from the equation, Bickerstaff's going to have to, well, one, Cunningham has to be healthy for a full season. Because if he's not, you can't really expect much from Detroit. He's their best player. But now it's with Monty gone. Can you, I guess, recoup some of Ivey's confidence, actually find a role for him, and have him go out there and develop? Because you use the high pick on him. He came out of Purdue, highly rated. You got to get something out of him. Past those two, figure out. I mean, you got some guys there that you can work with. Obviously, with the offseason getting underway, maybe they could work some things out. But this is just a situation where, was it Trajan Langdon is there now, I believe? Yeah. And just give Bickerstaff a few years to see what he has. Like, he's coming into this not necessarily late in the process, but kind of a little behind. Once again, as Anthony put, they did the draft without him. So now he's in there with players that do they fit his philosophy? Do they not? Well, he's going to have to make it work. Now he has to get a coaching staff around him. Who knows how long that will take? I mean, I don't know if he plans on carrying over some people from Monty's staff, but then if Monty were to go somewhere, I believe all the coaching jobs are taken at this point. But it's just a weird situation right now. So can Bickerstaff even get a staff together before summer league starts? I would hope so. Maybe some people from Cleveland he can kind of bring along with him. I don't know, but it's just weird with the way that Detroit handled this and why they waited so long.
To fire
But
Monty,
yo, go ahead, go ahead.
you fired that man right before the draft. If you were going to fire him, you should have fired him as soon as the season was over, or as soon as you were mathematically eliminated, which wasn't very long into the season. He was a candidate for a midseason firing.
Yeah,
So the fact that they waited until right before the draft to fire Monty, and then so they had to wait till after the draft to even figure out who they wanted to be their head coach. This was an avoidable mistake. Now you're giving this man behind the eight ball. So they better you're putting this man behind the eight ball. So you better have some patience with him
yeah,
if you're gonna do that.
yeah. That's the only way that this could even begin to work. You bring him in, you let him do his thing. Use this season for him to, I guess, build confidence, because last season they had the 20-something game losing streak, and we already know that the worst thing for an organization is to have players that are just used to losing, because it's hard to break that habit with a lot of guys. And Bickerstaff is now being tasked with trying to do that. And, Bickerstaff had a winning record in Cleveland. There's a lot of people who thought he should probably still be in Cleveland, but now he's in Detroit, which is obviously less desirable than the Cleveland job. But this needs to be a situation that Detroit goes, look, we've been bad for a while. Then it was, we weren't really that bad. We were a piece or two away. It's been like 6-7 years that every preseason is like Detroit is a piece or two away. Now bring some stability to coaching and find that piece or two. Who knows? It could be somebody on the roster right now that just didn't maybe not have gotten a fair chance with Monty, or the system that they were running was messed up. They just got to figure it out. Figure it out. Figure out one thing this year. That's it. Who's your core? Simple task, and move on from there. Anthony says so. The owner did the picks for the draft. Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the GM, I guess. You got anything else, Jory?
Type of franchise. Them and the Wizards are neck and neck for those I do not like talking about.
Yeah. I mean, it is difficult. But look, if you're a Pistons fan, you got somebody new. Whether this is the guy you wanted or not, kind of seems like this was probably the only guy who's going to take the job right now. So it is what it is. So as Anthony did bring up, as we brought up during this conversation, the draft happened. Looking at the draft, it was 58 picks this season. A couple of teams had a draft pick docked, so it wasn't 60. It was an interesting first round where we saw a lot of international players going at the top of the draft, which, a lot of American fans aren't happy with that, even though like this is kind of the product of the Dream Team back in '94, making the game a more global game like that. So you knew that this is probably coming down the line. But looking at the draft, all 58 picks, like what were your thoughts on it? I don't know whether it was like your biggest thing or anything like that. What would you draw? Would you draw from this draft that we just had?
Zach Edey at 9 was a reach, but I get why Memphis got him. They need size so Jaren Jackson Jr. can play his true position.
Yeah.
It's a reach
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
The fact that Filipowski fell out of the first round was also a surprise. And the fact that nobody decided they wanted to draft Connect and he fell into my Lakers lap. I'm not complaining about it
Mm-hmm.
because I already know where that second round pick was going. In that situation, the, you better use the first one on a very valuable piece of player that I can use now. Minnesota also did pretty well during this draft. They traded for Rob Dillingham, and then they drafted Terrence Shannon Jr., which will give Anthony Edwards some more weapons that'll be more consistent with shooting and making your shots and maybe showing
Mm-hmm.
up. And Oklahoma City making trades. Even though the trade that they did make, I wish they hadn't have did that. I'm like, I was perfectly fine with them keeping that player. I'm like, that's a useful piece for them. But they see the bigger picture and I don't.
I don't know about that one. I get what you're saying, Anthony, because we know his last name, but I mean, look, as a Celtics fan, it is tough for me to give the Lakers credit. I think the Connect pick is a really good pick. He's a guy that he knows how to play, and where progressively we're getting into a draft situation where a lot of teams are just taking unknowns because they have raw talent or whatever. I feel like with Connect, you know what you're getting. You can put him in certain situations, and he will be fine. Uh, I mean, I don't know if you had any more observations before I get into mine. Okay, so the Zach Edey thing, I agree with you. I was look, I had my mind like wrapped around him going late in the first round, something like that. Him to go at 9, it's crazy to me. But also, like you said, I understand the fit because for Memphis, my biggest issues with Memphis has been Jaren Jackson can't be your 5 because mentally he doesn't play like a 5. In his mind, he wants to be like a wing player. So if you have Edey on the court along with him, for Edey, in his rookie season, all you need him to be is what you lost when you moved on from Steven Adams. That's all he needs to do. He has a bigger frame. I do think it'll be interesting to see how teams attack Edey in the NBA because I do worry about him if you pull him away from the basket against certain teams. He may get lost in the shuffle, but we'll have to see how he can adapt to that. I mean, looking at the other aspects of the draft, like the French connection that's going on, which I do think that they made a good point about, like Tony Parker's kind of influence on that, where he's like setting up camps all over France and like teaching these young guys over there the NBA game. So they're coming over here fully understanding, how the game flows and everything like that. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. In a lot of cases, French basketball is seen as a like top international like ground for talent. Now, we'll obviously have to see how these guys perform in the NBA, but they are rookies, so you kind of have to temper your expectations necessarily. I will say one thing: the coverage of the draft, like that, needs to be talked about. Luckily, they had 2 channels for it. Now, if you were stuck watching the ESPN broadcast, I feel bad for you because that one you had Stephen A, who we know. In terms of college basketball, especially international players, Stephen A doesn't know any of these guys. I mean, he was relying on a binder that he had, which I'm gonna assume somebody probably put together for some talking points for him. They had Bob Myers, the former GM from Golden State, which I was fine with, getting kind of a GM perspective on what teams might do. The ABC broadcast, you had Andrea Carter and Jay Billis, two people who know the college game. Because I like for the first half of the first one, I was watching ESPN and I was like, there's got to be a different broadcast for this. And I tuned to ABC and I felt like it was a better product there. Anthony says the WNBA was better than the NBA draft.
Precisely.
There's probably a lot of factors for that. We knew more players that were in the WNBA draft than the NBA draft, which also points to the NBA media as well. They spent so much time talking about where Bronny could go. Is Bronny going to be a second round pick? Could Bronny be a first round pick? That we knew nothing about most of these players. The only players we knew about outside of Bronny, we know Edie because of the NCAA tournament and a lot of the conversations that surrounded him back then. I guess Castle because he was on UConn with Klingon. You knew a little bit about them. I mean, the Terrence Shannon stuff, all we really knew about him was like the legal thing that he went through, which he was exonerated for, but that dropped him in the draft. And the Filipowski thing, because I was sitting there with like you, and I was just like, okay, we're getting to the end of the first round. This dude's still sitting in the green room, and he's not hearing his name. And then somebody reported like, his girlfriend and him not speaking to his family and stuff like that. And I was like, you can't tell me this is why he's dropping in the draft. And I mean, another thing to kind of go off of is I kind of hate the narrative that if you played 3-4 years in college, there has to be something wrong with you. And they could just be happy playing in college or just want to develop in college. I don't think that's really a knock on a player if they stay longer than one season. I don't understand that at all. Because there's a player that you and I were surprised wasn't drafted in DJ Burns. He was the talk of the tournament, and we never heard anybody bring up his name during the draft. Luckily, he's signed on after, which for some players is kind of a bigger deal. But I was shocked he was never picked. But that's the NBA for you. I'm sure you have thoughts on your second round pick, so I'll let you go ahead with that one.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Look, that was one of those things that I just had to learn to accept it. He will get some burn time. Probably not meaningful minutes. He's not going to play more than connect.
At least he should.
Season. If he plays the season. I'm not even about that part. I do know we're going into summer league. Maybe I don't know if they're just that pompous that he doesn't want to play summer leagues, but he needs to play summer leagues because he still has some developing to go. And he's not playing with little boys anymore. He's playing with grown ass men. So I kind of need him to let's go now. Because I was like, my thing is, don't make this a wasted draft pick. Just don't make it a wasted pick. If you've got a good rotational piece, you could put him alongside his damn daddy, which would be cool to see. I'm not even going to be a hater about that. That would be cool to see. But if he can be a key, like a rotational piece, and maybe working his way into be a starter, that's fine. Just don't shove him there in the first spot. In the first place, make him earn it and not be a wasted draft pick. That's my thing about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't find anything in there that I necessarily disagree with. I mean, look, we were already prepared for obviously Bronny being a Laker. I will say, I'm sure you probably would agree with, I did not like the Rich Paul aspect of it. It just made it a whole lot worse than it needed to be.
He made them look messy.
Yeah. It just the calling teams and telling them, oh, don't draft him or he'll play in Australia. It's like, I get you're his agent. You're supposed to do what's best for him. But it just doesn't look right. So now
Bronny looked
go
bad.
ahead. Yeah.
I'm like, well, you're making them both look bad. Now you got the internet eviscerating this young man,
Mm-hmm.
calling him a nepo baby, which is true, but they're not saying it in a way that will be. They're not saying it in a good way. They're saying it as he didn't earn where he was to be today. He only got that because Rich Paul bullied his way into the Lakers um drafting him. He don't deserve that. He deserves a chance, at least a valid chance, considering what Bronny has been through with it, what Bronny has been through. It's like he could have handled that 100 times better. I understand business is business, but when you have high profile clients, I think you would try to not make your clients look messy and look bad. Because this is a bad look, in all honesty.
Yeah, because I mean, look, part obviously you kind of understand with him being LeBron's son that there was going to be some hate around that, and even in terms of hate necessarily, I guess depending on what was said, there are like legit criticisms of the pick depending on how you voice that. Because once again, Bronny played in what 20 games or so. We know the heart condition he had. He still only averaged 4 points a game. So for a lot of people watching the coverage, they felt like it was a lot of time spent for a guy who went 55th, scoring 4 points a game. Kind of when I watched it, I thought it was kind of disrespectful that they like basically glossed over the Celtics pick right before because they knew the Lakers were on the clock. The Mark Tatum guy, who's the deputy commissioner, who's there announcing picks, they actually skipped some of the picks that he made so that they made sure they had the time to cut to him to announce the Bronny pick. And then after that, they went straight talking to Bronny. I think another pick or two happened. They didn't announce it. And they
Yeah,
kind of went back and talked about a couple of picks. Yeah, I'm like, you're stealing that moment from those kids. I mean, obviously they know they're getting picked, but like they're fans. Why not give them that, moment where Tatum says their name, everybody, talks about who the player is and everything like that, but they didn't get that. That was my issue with it. I feel like that's where, a lot of the social media stuff came from. It was that by the time we finally got to the draft and the pick, a lot of people were over the story about Bronny. But now that we know he's actually going to be a Laker, I'm assuming. Now, this is the other tricky part, though. Rich Paul also said not that long ago that Bronny's not playing in the G League. I don't know how that's possible because if he needs development, you're just going to sit him on the bench and hope for a random night you have some garbage time to throw him out there. I mean, obviously, he can develop a little bit in practice, but that's not the same. Like, he needs to be in the G League if you know you're not going to use him over a long stretch of games just to give him game time. I'm not going to sit here and tell you like Bronny's a terrible player. We just don't know a lot about his game. He's a 6'1". I think some people try to say he's 6'2" now. I don't know. But he's going to be a point guard. We don't know much about his like shot selection and all that, his ability to run a team necessarily. We don't know any of that. In the G League, he can develop, learn how to do that. And like you said, he's going up against a lot of guys who just because of how select the NBA 15-man roster is, they're not up there, but they have talent in the G League. How does Bronny deal with that? If certain guys are, seeking him out defensively, how does he hold up with that? I would like to see that in a G League setting. And then when he's ready, if it's like midseason or something, you bring him up, put him on your bench, find a role for him. I feel like that's the only path to success, but I guess we'll kind of have to see what they decide to do with him. I don't know. What's going on, Key? I mean, you as a Lakers fan, like, how would you like to see Bronny's first season play out?
you gotta earn it. Like, yes, welcome to the league, but nothing is going to be given to you at this point. From now on, it is not going to be given to you. And there will be players who will be mad at you because they feel like you got into the league because of who your daddy is. And they will try to take that out on you. This is the grown man's league. So the time for coddling Bronny is up. Now, Rich Paul also might be putting his foot in his mouth when he say Bronny's not gonna play no summer league and no G League, which he does. Because like, why would you even like? In my mind, that's setting this man up for failure. If we know he needs developing, and you want to try to throw him in trash minutes of a game instead of getting his repertoire set up straight in the summer when it don't count, when it really does not matter, like that's counterproductive. And I feel like that was either a lie. I think that was just a. I really think they're just talking just to talk. Yeah, because I'm like, you can't possibly see a negative in playing the G League for Brian. If you do, you're nitpicking. I just want to see him earn it. I don't want to see it given. And I think by him working his way up, starting G League and a summer league, and working his way into making the roster and starting off on the bench, I think that's the way to go. Not no. Whatever Rich Paul talking about, do the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the more that we saw, how the draft played out, I am hoping that the whole he's not going to do the G League thing was like a scare tactic to scare teams away from drafting him that would obviously want him to go straight to the G League. That's my only hope, because if he sits there on the bench and you are going to try to force, I guess, JJ Redick's hand in playing him a certain amount of minutes so that he can, acclimate to the NBA product, yeah, that's counterproductive. That's not fair to Bronny. It's not fair to JJ Redick as the coach. And it wouldn't be fair to a rostered guy that's now going to have their minutes cut into just to get Bronny out on the court. Now, yeah, if he goes to the G League and he kills it for a month or so, you bring him up, then yeah, you want to steal whoever's minutes, knock yourself out. But just to kind of hand it to him, like you said, it just doesn't make any sense. When everybody who's a college analyst says, Bronny's a hard worker and all this, but he's not an NBA player right now. And he's just not. He hasn't had enough actual time on the court to let people know what kind of player he could be. So, as a Celtics fan, just saying this, I do hope that they don't turn this into a bit of a sideshow, because that's another thing that can happen is if Bronny's sitting on the bench, you'll get a bunch of fans that will just start chanting his name, wanting to see him in the game. And then if it doesn't happen, you'll get boos or something like that. And then that just turns him into a sideshow. Once again, that wouldn't be fair to him. As Anthony put it, could have signed him after the draft. Could, yes. That probably would have played out that way. If the Lakers went somewhere else at 55, depending on, like I said, if the reports of him telling teams not to draft him, I'm assuming the next three teams probably wouldn't have taken him, and you sign him after the draft. Fine. Nobody would have cared. But they didn't do it that way. So, I mean, second round picks anyway, usually those picks you're taking a shot on the guy anyway. So, who cares? Like, I'm not mad about the pick. Obviously, I don't necessarily care that much as a Celtics fan, but I'm not mad at the Lakers picking him. I just didn't like the Rich Paul aspect of how it got there. That's my only issue.
He sure did show his whole rear end. He showed his whole ass. I'm like,
Yeah.
you make everybody else look bad. You make the
Yeah.
organization look bad. You're making your clients look bad. And you make yourself look bad with this clownish behavior. Like, if half of us know what's the scare tactic and what you're actually going to do, don't play the
Yep.
public like we're stupid. We are not stupid.
Also, kind of undermines Anthony Davis a little bit because before this draft, there's a lot of talk of, oh, Anthony Davis was more involved in discussions and they're focusing on him going forward. And then what we've seen is they hire JJ Redick, LeBron's podcast co-host or whatever. They draft his son. So it's almost like they're still doing stuff for LeBron, not necessarily Anthony Davis, even though we were told it was supposed to be a shift in philosophy this offseason. So yeah, Rich Paul didn't help anybody.
Lakers are always a spectacle. I'm tired of it. Can we get to playing good basketball if we're going to cause this much of a spectacle?
I mean, that's going to be another part of this as well. Because now people will wonder, if Bronny does struggle in his rookie season, some people will say, well, they could have drafted player X instead of him. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot for Bronny to kind of have to deal with.
You just
Anthony
want to see
says,
LeBron fight.
I thought I see a Draymond versus Bronny beef.
I don't think
I mean,
LeBron somebody try to do too much to his son.
Yeah. What's going on, comment? Appreciate you tuning in. I mean, look, Bronny's going to have that moment that we remember with Lonzo Ball. He went up against Pat Beverly. Pat Beverly wanted to make an example out of him. Bronny's going to have that moment. It might be Pat Beverly again. We know he loves doing that kind of stuff.
I hope Bronny saw him. Okay, stand.
We'll see. We'll have to see how he reacts. We'll have to see how LeBron reacts to stuff like that. That's like I guess the dramatic portion of Bronny actually being in LA with him. How does certain things happen? If a ref makes a bad call on Bronny, how do you react?
If a bad call happened on Bronny, he get LeBron storming across the goddamn spot line.
It's fascinating. The NBA likes stories and everything. Like they've got one in LA for sure. I mean, I know Anthony did ask about Blake Hinson because he did sign with the Lakers at a 2-way deal as well. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know much about his game, so I'm not gonna pretend to even give you a point of view on that one.
I don't know who that is. I'll have to watch a few things of highlights and tape and kind of get into the numbers, and then I can get back at you. Get at me next week, not right now.
Exactly. We'll table that one for next week. I will say, for my Celtics, the Shireman pick at 30, because he was a guy that I remember seeing a couple of games with him at Creighton. I did watch some YouTube stuff about him and read like draft profile and everything on him. I get the pick, for a Celtics team that's pretty much locked up with their current core into next season. Shireman is also one of those dreaded older college players, which, as I said earlier, in some instances, drafting a guy who stays a few more years in college is probably beneficial. Because if you run into a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds on your team, you got to worry about maturity and everything like that. And if you stack too many of them together, you just have a really young team with no direction at times. And I feel like guys like Shireman, who've been to college, been through a couple of tournaments and stuff, he's probably going to be more ready-made for the NBA game than a lot of these younger players. So I didn't have a problem with it. He's a guy who can shoot the three. We already know that's what the Celtics like to do, drive and kick. He seems like he would fit. He probably won't see a lot of time this year, but I could see maybe 2 years down the road when obviously going to have to start losing some players, that he's a guy who could probably fill a role there. And the second round pick was a big who kind of seems like he could be like a Xavier Tillman like big man. So I understood both picks from Brad Stevens. So I like what the Celtics did with their draft.
Yeah, because if you get to just draft a whole bunch of 18 or 19-year-old kids, you end up with the Houston Rockets.
Yeah. Where then, like after a year or two, you got to give up on a few of them because you can't find enough time to develop all of them.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you see what the Rockets are going through now. Even though the Rockets, I feel like are on the uptick.
Yeah.
They got a damn good coach in Ime.
Mm-hmm.
And he has that he's put his little personality print on that team. And then you
Yeah.
get Dylan Brooks being a menace to pretty much everybody else. But they have an identity and they're building. Now the Rockets of like a few years ago were nothing but babies.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago they were nothing but babies. And unless you want to deal with what Houston dealt with then, don't just sit here and draft a whole bunch of 18, 19-year-old kids that just don't want to do nothing but run around and shoot.
Yeah. Um, I will say before we go into the off season, the whole international flavor to the draft, and obviously seemingly the next few drafts, it does have to call into question kind of the American way of developing talent because a lot of these, you know, Frenchmen or Spaniards or whatever, like they go pro from a very early age. Not going to say that that's going to change over here, but because of that, they learn a professional work ethic early on. Problem that we see a lot of times here is a lot of top talent don't necessarily play like at their high school. They play AAU, which is basically like a collection of all-star players that from around the same area, and they go out and they basically just play tournament after tournament after tournament, not necessarily practicing or anything like that. Which is why a lot of people, I'm sure Conman, if you're still in here, you know, as somebody who's watched the game for a while, a lot of people who aren't big fans of today's NBA, they look at the very reason of fundamentals not being there with a lot of players. You know, a lot of players just wanting to jack up threes and everything like that. While a lot of these international guys can understand, you know, back cuts and all the kind of stuff that seems like is getting lost over here in America, which is why you're seeing a lot of these guys come over here, enter the draft, and are getting drafted much higher than some American players. Now, whether or not we see some type of shift in AAU or something like that here in America, I don't know because for a lot of people, if it's not broke, they don't fix it. It's been kind of like that for a while, but yeah, it's. Hold on. Anthony says, first of all, players in France, where can I watch their games on TV? Because I don't know nobody in this draft. And I talked about that earlier. Like, a lot of people say France is the best country in terms of international for talent. I feel like a lot of these bigger name uh, sports news, like ESPN, Fox Sports, and everything, like they should be kind of educating us as fans on who these players are. Like the Hawks took Risa Shea. I didn't know a thing about him. Now, obviously, like after they picked him, I went and watched some like highlights on him, and I see kind of the talent that's there. But it would have been nice to know a little bit about him before the draft. I know Alex Sarr they talked about for a little bit. I knew a little bit about him, so I feel like it's. I don't know how they fix that necessarily. Whether it's they just dedicate to the draft as we get closer to it. I guess we can kind of point towards Stephen A. since he apparently runs things at ESPN. Like get that into first take or something somehow. I don't know. Like us as fans should be better educated.
Or we could just stop talking about the same stuff over and over and over again and talk about new things.
Yes,
And we can stop talking
exactly.
about give my Lakers a goddamn break. And you'll have more room to bring in more knowledge about these stars from wherever. It's the worldwide thing of sports, not just the Lakers, Cowboys, and damn Yankees. Who cares about them? I care about the Lakers, but who cares? There is so much other things to be talking about. The WNBA could be getting more coverage, but no, we want to talk about the Lakers and Cowboys and Yankees every single day of our lives. Give it a break. If we could stop talking about the same stuff over and over and over again and actually incorporate all forms of sports from both genders, from everything, like it was supposed to be, we wouldn't have these issues of people not knowing who people is. Because they will find a player that they find interesting, go back and do the research on their own, and then they might find a whole plethora of things they find interesting. Y'all know how rabbit holes go.
Yeah.
It just starts by one person. And it starts with not talking about the same stuff over and over and over again, like a broken record.
I mean, that's well said. I mean, especially with like in ESPN, they literally have an ESPN Plus. You can throw a lot of this on there. Fine. I know they have ESPNU. I don't know how many people necessarily have access to ESPNU, but even then, they probably spend a lot of time talking about American college players as opposed to a lot of these international players. Now, this was supposed to be a weak draft. Maybe that's where a lot of this is probably coming from. I feel like to a lot of fans and pundits, like this wasn't necessarily the most exciting draft to talk about. Then again, the only way a draft is necessarily weak is once they're picked, how many of them turn out to be busts or whatever. Like
You
if
gonna
Reese Shea saw, yeah, it's like if Reese Shea, Sar, Castle, Klingon, Edie, if some of these guys have really good rookie seasons, then it wouldn't necessarily be that the draft was weak. It was just that the coverage of it was weak in some of these prospects.
and find something else to talk about. Why we gotta focus 30 to 40 minutes on damn Bronny being a Laker when there's a million other people we could be talking about? Like I said earlier, give my Lakers a goddamn rest. I am tired.
Well, we know that's not going to happen because during the draft, all they talked about was all they kept putting up on the corner was like, "Oh yeah, summer league, July 12th." I think the Lakers have the first game, so they're already ready for that. And you know that summer league game is going to be everywhere. Bronny makes his first basket. Bronny this. So hey,
I'll be Bronny'd
you
out
not
by
you probably will be. All right, so sticking with the NBA, the offseason. Now I used, DeJounte Murray and Mikal Bridges because those are the two guys that were moved. So as somebody who now lives in Atlanta and everything like that, we didn't even get into this. Actually, let me back up a little bit because this right here, this is very much going to be a possibility because we know LeBron opted out, which I guess does work into the offseason. LeBron opted out because he wants a new deal. If they give him 3 years, I do believe in 3 years' time, Bryce would be draft eligible. So there's a very good chance we may go through this whole process again in a couple of years.
hell no. No.
Wherever LeBron is at that point, that is going to become a story of that offseason. Now, if it is in LA, the thought process is that Bryce is a better prospect than Bronny. How you can make that statement on a kid in high school, I don't know. I don't buy into all that. Like, let me see you in a college setting first before I could say you're better or worse, but it's neither here nor there.
They're only saying all that because Bryce is taller than Bronny. That's the only reason why they're saying
Pretty
that.
much. Pretty much. So, Anthony, that could happen. I mean, if it does, I'm sorry, Jory, you'll have to go through this again. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, it does fit in with the offseason because, like I said, LeBron opted out. All indications are he's going to opt back. He's going to get a new deal with the Lakers. We understand that. So looking at these two here, Murray gets moved from Atlanta, which Me living in Atlanta, watching the Hawks was not the move I was expecting unless they do something else after that. But he's now in New Orleans. I think it's a great pickup for New Orleans. They've needed a point guard. Like they tried CJ McCollum there last year. That's not what CJ can do. Murray is a legit point guard, so I understand that. Mikal Bridges gets out of Brooklyn. He goes like what over the bridge because Brooklyn plays in Jersey to play with the Knicks. So now the Knicks have 4 Villanova players. So Knicks fans are going crazy, even though Stephen A. did say at that time none of these Villanova guys were great NBA prospects, but now he's celebrating it. But whatever. So just starting there, looking at these two, which one is the bigger move for their new team? Or which one will have more impact, I guess?
The DeJounte trade, because what the hell are the Hawks doing? Like, what are y'all doing?
I've asked that. I've come to a conclusion that would make sense. If DeJounte Murray is the first move, and after this they're moving Trae Young somewhere else, so they decided not to keep one, but just to move on from both, I completely get it. But if they're only moving Murray to try to rebuild once again around Trae Young, then yeah, it makes zero sense to me. Because we've seen what Trae Young is. I feel like Atlanta has an issue in terms of putting players around Trae. I think there's been issues with coaches trying to get Trae to play a certain way. I just feel like for the best interest of Hawks fans and the Hawks in general, they needed to move on from Trae Young. Because the bad part is, yeah, you move Murray out. The Hawks don't really have any picks the next few years because all those picks went to the Spurs to get Murray in the first place, which I do think is why a lot of people are looking at the Spurs now as a possible destination for Trae Young. That way the Hawks can get some of those picks back that they gave up for Murray. And at least then the Hawks would be ripping the Band-Aid off and completely starting over. But yeah, I need to see them make that Trae Young trade to make the Murray trade make any sense to me.
They traded DeJounte Murray to the Pelicans for Larry Nance Jr., Dyson Daniels, and 2 first-round picks.
Yeah.
Larry Nance Jr., Dyson Daniels. They could have just took 4 first-round picks. Start the whole thing over.
I mean, they could. I don't know if Murray gets you 4 first-round picks. Well, look, after what Bridges got, I don't know anymore what the value is in the NBA. I'm not just, I guess, to move to Bridges for a second. I like Bridges, but I'm not the biggest Bridges guy. Like some people are looking at this like Bridges is some superstar. You bring him to the Knicks, and now the Knicks are going to be finals ready or something. I just don't see it because for Bridges, the one thing I've kind of knocked with his game is he's not a shot creator. Like he's really good catch and shoot or like a little dribble, move like a rhythm dribble up into a shot. But if you're going to give it to him like on the wing and ask him to go get you a bucket, I think he's kind of limited there. Defensively, he's good. He does add defensively. But I also don't look at the Bridges trade, especially as a Celtics fan, and go, oh no, here come the Knicks. That just doesn't do it for me, especially knowing that they might lose Hartenstein because of this. And I'm a big fan of Hartenstein. Like that's a guy you don't have to draw plays up for. He kills teams on the glass. If they lose out on that, I do think that takes a lot away from what the Knicks are and have been.
Hartenstein learned from the best. He can go get himself a bucket.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, with that, I mean, I get why they did it, but at the same time, I probably would have prioritized keeping Hartenstein a little bit better. Even though he come off the, actually no, he was not coming off the bench. The last few the last time I saw the Knicks play, he was starting. So you're about to lose a
Yeah.
starter.
I mean, he was like Mitchell Robinson insurance, but Mitchell Robinson tends to get hurt every
Okay.
year. But
So
yeah, yeah,
um they could they really that was one of the puzzling ones, but I see why they did it. It was puzzling, but it didn't go to the whole what the hell are you thinking? The Hawks trade took me straight there. Because I'm like, if y'all needed to get rid of anybody, it was gonna be Mr. Shimmy Man, who plays no defense.
yeah.
I mean, if they try to get rid of him, trade, or maybe I'm hearing that the Hawks did this trade because Murray had more value. Of course, Trey doesn't have value. He's not a good player. So of course he's not gonna have um good value. Y'all overpaid him. He's not that good. He doesn't play defense. He can be very difficult to coach. All he do is run around, play cardio, bump and run his defense, and shimmy his goddamn shoulders with a badass haircut. He brings nothing to the franchise.
Well, he does bring one thing. He's in commercials. So for
Oh
Hawks
Lord.
fans, he's he's a name. He's been to a couple of All-Star games because that's one thing I learned when I moved to Atlanta. They they are a fan base that's really quick to point out how disrespected their players are, and the
When
fact that
we're
Trey
not.
is exactly. It's just that the winning hasn't been there enough for their players to be a bigger deal on a national scale. And I just don't I just don't get it because I'm with you. Like even if Trey Young puts up numbers, they make the playoffs, they're always going to lose to teams like Miami or Boston or some of these teams that have bigger guards and forwards that can switch out onto him because he's such a small player that the further you get him backpedaling away from the hoop, his passing lanes are cut off, and these bigger guards will just target him defensively, and he just becomes a like a net negative at that point.
A liability. You could say it, a liability.
Okay, yes, he's definitely a liability, and like his shooting percentages have slightly gone down each year. So the one aspect of his game that you hoped would overshadow his defensive inefficiency, it's getting worse. So he has even less value. Plus, the big price tag doesn't help in any way. So I do hope that Atlanta, Landry Fields and those guys, Murray was just the first step in getting Trey Young out of here. I hope.
I feel bad for Quinn Snyder.
Yes, who's actually a pretty good coach, but if you're going to stick him with a Trey Young, he may end up out the door next year.
He has trash to deal with and an incompetent front office who's been incompetent since I was 5. The last time the Hawks, the best time, their best chance to win a championship of any sort, was the year they got dismantled by LeBron.
Yeah, that 60-win team. Yeah.
That, and I'm glad how Al Horford got his ring. I'm glad because he deserved it then.
Yeah.
But ever since then, ever since then, it's been a steady decline into absolute failure and dysfunction. And now we're to the point where we know that the front office ain't worth 2 nickels. They couldn't sell me nothing for free.
That's, I could not put that any better. So I'll just let that stay as the final word on the Hawks. Also, looking at the offseason, to I guess move on to another player or two, Paul George, Clay Thompson are two names that are being, kicked around in a few places. I know Paul George, I think what I saw was like the finalists for Paul George would be Philly, Orlando, which I was kind of surprised to see Orlando in there. Or I can't remember the third team. I guess for the Clippers, technically. And for Klay Thompson, it seems like his time with Golden State is officially over, and he will be somewhere else next season. I do think, well, I think Klay has been linked to the Lakers supposedly since the LeBron opt-in, well, opt-out, re-signing. He's supposed to take a little less than the max possibly to bring in an impact player, and Klay Thompson was part of that list. Okay, so looking at those two, Paul George, Klay Thompson, where do you think their best fits are?
First, you need to quit playing, and if you want to use his good knees and use the good out of them knees, and take his ass to Philadelphia. That's the closest he's going to get to a championship. It's not going to be Orlando, and we know Paul George has his injuries. Even though putting him in Philadelphia with Joel Embiid, even though I already know what the bottom of Joel Embiid's shoes looks like, but I think that's a better fit because he ain't going nowhere being a Clipper. I might be a Lakers fan, and it's so much uncertainty, but the Clippers are gonna stink. I promise you. They're gonna take everybody on this roller coaster of this overratedness. The only thing that's not overrated about that team is their head coach. Harden, overrated. Russell Westbrook, even though I know they're bringing him back for $4 million. At this point, overrated. Kawhi can't stay healthy, can't stay on the court. Overrated at this point in his career. And it gets you nowhere quickly. The Clippers do a bunch of nothing. So Paul George needs to feels like he needs to realize that, and the reason why he's at this point with the Clippers is because they didn't want to give him a fourth year. Now, if he goes to Philly for 4 years, I promise you they'll get past. I can make a bet that they'll get past the second round of the playoffs at least once.
Yeah.
And as far as Klay, I don't want Klay. I don't want Klay. Because at that point, him and D'Angelo Russell could just have a whole, I'm going to chuck stuff up at the rim and hope it sticks off. And I already got to still deal with D'Angelo Russell. And Max Christie signed a 4-year, $30 million to stay with the Lakers, too. That's decent. I like that. But, no. I'm either going to deal with D'Angelo Russell or I'm going to deal with Klay Thompson. I'm not dealing with both. They need to leave Klay alone. He can go to Orlando or to the Pistons or to the Rockets or somewhere. He might take a spike deal just to get out of Golden State.
Well, I mean, I feel like with Golden State, they clearly are, committed to Steph Curry because Steph Curry's been looking at the Splash Brothers. Steph Curry's been the more durable one. I mean, look, I felt bad for Klay with the first injury. I felt even worse that he got injured again, rehabbing the first injury. Klay's dealt with a lot. I do think that he obviously still has some position in the NBA. He just has to go to the right team. I guess I understand where the Laker connection, I guess, is coming in. His dad, Michael Thompson, played for the Lakers. I get it. You figure JJ Redick would understand how to use a guy like Klay Thompson, coming off of screens, getting threes, stuff like that. I get it. Look at the Lakers. There were times where they just needed a guy to hit a shot from the perimeter. I understand all that. My only thing with Klay is going to be, what does the price tag look like? Because I honestly don't know what the value for Klay Thompson is. I'm seeing some guys, like Nick Claxton, 4 years, $100 million in Brooklyn. He's also a big man, so that's a little bit. Or who?
Oh no, 4 years, $100 million.
I'm not saying like that's necessarily what he'll get because Klay's an older player, But like the 25 million a year, would that be enough to get Clay somewhere? Does Clay in his mind think he's like a 35 million a year type of player? That's what I want to know. Like if he goes somewhere, how much are teams having to pay for a guy that obviously, like I said before, with the injuries, his defense has slipped, and you have to kind of understand that he's going to have some rough shooting nights as he did in Golden State this past year. That's my only thing. How much will he cost on the open market?
I'm not paying no more than $10 million a year for Klay Thompson. And that's a reach. If he think that he's still on a level that he could get a 4-year, $100+ million contract, he is smoking grass. He is delusional.
Hey, the NBA is teams got money to throw around, and some of these teams will spend it foolishly. Anthony said, I don't know what the Knicks trade did. You added more shooters, but still no bench.
Look,
Hey, Knicks fans love it. Good for them. If as a Celtics fan, I'm not losing sleep over Bridges in New York.
overrate the Knicks, and when they continuously fail in the playoffs, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. But I do agree with you. The Paul George to Philly makes the most sense if he does leave LA. I know the Clippers also have to make a decision on James Harden. And if I'm Ballmer, I'd rather keep Paul George than James Harden. I mean, most people probably know at this point, I've never been a big James Harden guy, even much less of a James Harden guy now. Because if you're going to re-sign him, it seems like everybody gets 3 or 4 year deals in free agency. James Harden's 33 now. I have no idea what James Harden's going to look like at age 37, 38. I can't promise he's going to stay in the best shape. I can't promise that he won't just become less and less efficient. We've seen him disappear playoffs and stuff like that. I don't want to sign up for James Harden at age 37. Not me.
He is not going to be in shape in 4 years. I can bet that.
Yeah. But I get like the Clippers have the new arena opening up, so they want as many big names as they can to sell that. But if you had to choose, yeah, but selling that new arena to the Clippers fans, like you need big names. Kawhi obviously is locked in there. So if the Ballmer mentality is we can only have 2 out of the 3, then make Paul George stay. James Harden can go anywhere else he needs to go. Because trust me, wherever James Harden goes, I'm not. Yeah, I wouldn't lose sleep on him joining a new team. So Anthony says he likes PG to Dallas or the Warriors. I have heard Dallas for Klay Thompson. I heard that Dallas would be in on him, and the Warriors. Yeah, I think the Warriors obviously.
They're already at the 7th apron, and you know they make it hard to get stars.
Yeah. Which this is why the NBA put all those aprons in and everything. Like they don't want the trend was like all big name players are just joining up in certain cities. They don't want that, so that's why the second apron and all that's in there and the restrictions that come from it. And as an NBA fan, I can't be mad at it, but it will. I don't know. Certain instances, like it does kind of stink because you'll have teams that will have a lot of homegrown talent, but then they'll become too expensive, and then you're losing players that way, which I don't think the league necessarily wanted that to be a provision of this, but it's just, it is what it is. Like parity works for the NFL. Clearly the NBA is trying to get that way. I'm not mad at it. But let's go. Because we'll definitely talk more NBA offseason next week, because by then, who knows? A few more moves will probably happen because we do have a couple more topics to get into here. Switching to the WNBA. That Fever coach, who we are both such big fans of, after a recent loss, she came out and said that she wanted Caitlin Clark to shoot more. Also, kind of a secondary part of it was there was a press conference after a game where every question was going towards Caitlin Clark. Aaliyah Boston was literally sitting there next to her, and nobody would ask her anything. And Caitlin Clark was like, "Hey, you guys want to ask Aaliyah any questions?" And at that point, Aaliyah was just like, "I'm good," because clearly they don't want to ask her anything. So I think that kind of works into this story as well, in that one, this whole notion that Caitlin needs to shoot more. Because I went back and looked at their recent games, and if was it Coach Sykes or whatever would actually look at that, her shooting more will not equate to wins. And two, I don't know why Aaliyah Boston keeps getting looked over in the whole aspect of the fever, but I'll let you go ahead with this one first. Because like I said, if you've watched the past few weeks of the show, we both think that Sykes is way over her head with the attention that Clark's brought to Indiana, and the fact that they don't really have a system necessarily in place for all of these players to thrive in. And now that she's saying that she needs Caitlin to shoot more, further shows she's not the right person for this. But yeah, so Jory, what are your thoughts on Caitlin needing to shoot more?
She need a damn coach better. Since we gonna sit here and make truths. Caitlin might need to shoot more. No, she don't. When y'all was on that little winning streak, what were y'all doing? Y'all were playing through Aaliyah Boston, and it looked fine. Like they were both getting their touches. Aaliyah had herself a game when she had like 20-something points. And they're both getting their touches. But you can't do that consistently. I just looked it up. They are right now, though. They're winning by a point, by 3 points versus the Mercury. That was kind of like a looked upon matchup because Diana Taurasi decided to open her mouth. Yeah. But that's a DT. I don't mess with DT like that. She need to shoot more. How about you do better? How about you adjust the roster better? Do your lineup better. Call a timeout better. Do your job better. Instead of just, Caitlin needs to shoot more. That pissed me off.
Yep. Hold on. Get you back up here. All right.
Yeah. I'm like, get your life back. Get it together. Because there's a reason why the Fever are 7-12. And some of those games have been close. Well, not really. Mm-hmm. Because defense has been optional when it comes to this team at times. You have all these top picks who don't know how to win and who are ball dominant. And you have two players that you can work with, that you can figure out a system to work with in Aaliyah Boston. You can work with Caitlin Clark. I'll even put Kelsey Mitchell in there.
Yeah.
Kelsey Mitchell, yep. The rest of them, they're interchangeable, but you can build around them three. What she's doing is an absolute disgrace, and it's a display of ineptness. Talking about somebody need to shoot more. Do your job better. You are a head coach, not a quotable.
Yeah. To Anthony's question, Jory mentioned, because he asked like how many players on the Fever other than Clark. Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, Alyssa Smith during their run where they won some games. Like she had some really good performances as well. And oddly enough, I think I looked at like 6 or 7 of their most recent games. And their actual winning formula is Clark shooting about 12 times a game, but her assist numbers being up there around 9 to 11. When they do that, they've lost games as well, but they are more competitive. They are a better team when Aaliyah Boston is on double-double watch. Because, like you mentioned the Mercury game today, that they are winning, And if you look at the numbers, Caitlin Clark has 15 points, 12 assists, which means she's facilitating a lot. Aaliyah Boston has 17 and 8 rebounds, close to a double double. That's their winning formula. Because some games when that happens, because I do think in their recent run, Kelsey Mitchell's had a couple of games where she's dropped like 20, 23 points. Smith has had a few games where she dropped like 16, 17 points. So the last thing that this team needs to do is shift more to a Caitlin Clark dominant offense. They are much better off with her, scoring like 15, 16 points. But if she can get you 10, 11 assists, the Fever have shown that they can compete. So the shooting more doesn't make sense. I mean, Caitlin Clark is 4 for 14 in today's game. So she shot a little bit more than, average past couple of games where, like I said, it's around 12 shots a game. But 4 of 14 is not going to cut it. 2 of 10 from 3, no. Now, it looks like they're going to beat the Mercury, but yeah, the formula for them is not Caitlin shooting more. It's Caitlin getting Boston, Mitchell, Smith involved, with Caitlin sprinkling in some shots when like teams clamp down on those two, they kick it out. Then she can get actually probably lead to more open perimeter shots for Caitlin. That's what they need to focus on. So, yeah, Sykes is she's just whatever at this point.
We're not trying to take away from Caitlin Clark's scoring ability. We're not. It's better for her to be a facilitator than a flat out scorer. But people don't want to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we definitely know who some of those people are. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely just something we needed to touch on because there's one last topic that we do have sticking with the WNBA. The Vegas Aces. Seemed like not too long ago, everybody was down on them, wondering what's going on with them. Well, if you haven't been paying attention, they've won like 5 of their last 6. Asia Wilson, which once again to go to the whole, who's even in the WNBA besides Caitlin Clark? I don't know. Asia Wilson, easily the best player in the league, just continues to put up dominating numbers. The Aces, for a lot of the Caitlin Clark fans that have come over to the WNBA, the Aces have won back-to-back titles, are trying to go for a 3rd straight this season. And to be honest with you, if you watch them play, you might want to be, getting ready for a 3rd straight title. Obviously, there are some other teams that could stand in their way, but the collection of players that the Aces do have, because just looking here, you have Asia Wilson, you have Kelsey Plum, you have Chelsea Gray. It doesn't even show like Jackie Young, who is balling right now, and like this is kind of a team. Obviously, the Fever don't have an Asia Wilson or Kelsey Plum, but this is a like situation that the Fever should hope to get, where you have a really good player in Asia Wilson, but players like Gray and Young contribute a lot to their success. But yeah, so looking at the Aces, I guess would you agree with me? I think I saw you nodding your head that they're probably in line to win a 3rd straight. Who do you think would be their biggest competition? And yes, Anthony, yes. Once Chelsea Gray came back, yes.
And that's the reason why when people were hollering about her being on the Olympic team, I'm like, y'all finna see what happens when she comes back. She's supposed to come back. I knew she was due to come back before the Olympics. That's big. I really don't. Maybe I'm gonna give your son some credit. And the Liberty are the Liberty, but the Liberty can be got.
Mm-hmm.
Feel like the Aces should be rightfully favored because the way they're playing right now, they're on a roll. But the Sun could give them some issues. The Sun could give them some issues. What's his face? The Liberty could give them some issues. Hell, if you can look at maybe even the Lynx can give them a little bit of an issue, but the Lynx are starting to get a little topsy turvy. But they're a lot better than they were last year, which is all I asked
Mhm.
for. Put out some better basketball than whatever the hell that was last year from Minnesota.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like they're gonna be favorites, and they have some. I don't think Phoenix is gonna be much of a threat. They're old and slow, and I don't like half of their players. But the Sun and the Liberty could be a threat to the Aces.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the Lynx because I do think the Lynx, I guess because of the growth in Collier's game, like she's
Mm-hmm.
clearly their number one. They have like McBride and some other players there. I think it would be an interesting series if they were to meet up with the Aces in the playoffs. I could see that possibly being a good series. I know Anthony did put on here like, let's talk about someone that matters, which kind of disrespectful to the Aces, but I get it because he said Angel Reese, Rookie of the Year, 9 straight double doubles. We're both fans of Angel Reese. She did have another double double today, even though they lost to the Lynx. She went 10 points, 16 rebounds. So she just, I think at this point she's broken the Candace Parker like rookie double double record for consecutive games at this point, which that's a big deal because we all know Candace Parker was legit as a rookie. So I mean, not to take away from the Aces talk, but Anthony did want to bring up Angel Reese. I mean, she was
They
four
need
for
a
16 from the
guard.
field, but she still got the double double.
The Sky needed a true guard. I like their pieces, but I feel like they need a true guard. They got a lot of size, which I do like
Mm-hmm.
that. But once Cardoso gets more comfortable with her shot,
Yeah,
I feel like there's going to be a whole nother level to this. Even with Angel, once Angel gets more comfortable with her shot, and Kennedy can kind of uplift her a little bit. But
mm-hmm.
Kennedy, her name is Kennedy, not Kennedy, but it's just the CNH kind of mess with me a little bit. But it's Kennedy.
It is wild. Yes, yeah,
But they're they're gonna be a pretty decent team. I feel like it. They just need them shots to start falling instead of just chucking stuff up at the rim and it fall through.
yeah. And Cardoso, they did lose today, but she had a rough day. 1 of 9 shooting, only 3 points. So yeah, that's gonna be the big thing with them is getting her and Reese playing well at the same time because the
Mm-hmm.
dynamic of those two is something that a lot of teams may not be ready for if they're both like hitting on all cylinders. So maybe that's something that maybe the second half of the season they can figure it out. And even if they aren't a playoff team this year, next year could be a team to watch early on in the season as a team that could start off really well. Anthony has another question. Off topic, who do you think will be the first player signed in free agency? So I guess that'd be going back to the NBA. I'm
Paul
trying to
George.
think. So you're looking at, I guess, George Thompson. Because I think the other people who might be moved would be trades, like a Brandon Ingram,
Mm-hmm.
DeMar DeRozan, Trey Young.
Paul George will be the first one to be signed.
It kind of seems like, yeah, I would think most free agents are probably waiting for him to sign to understand where they can probably go in and get a
The meetings
contract
are
offer.
happening now. Like literally, those meetings are happening now. So I'm like,
Yeah,
I expect to hear something shortly about Paul George. Maybe not he's signing somewhere, but I expect to hear something shortly.
right. Like talks are picking up or something like
Mhm.
that. Because obviously, if he goes to Philly, then other free agents would be like, okay, Philly's probably off the books. Let's go talk to the Warriors or whoever. So yeah, I agree. Paul George would probably be the first one to go. Although I am paying attention to the DeMar DeRozan aspect of this as well, because I've been saying for like 3 years now, Bulls, give it up. You tried DeRozan and Levine and all these guys. It's not gonna work. So just
But
start over.
then doing that Caruso Giddy swap is further. They're blowing it up. That was just the soft part of them blowing it up.
Yeah,
It's coming. They finna blow that whole roster up.
right. Like I said, I hope because sometimes we'll see teams make a move like the Caruso Giddy thing, and then that'll be the only move they make, and it's like, okay, so now you're stuck in between blowing it up and running it back, which is never works in the NBA. You have to pick a path and stick with it.
They have nothing to run back. Their option, they're literally stuck between two hard places. The
Yeah,
option is you can explode and then you can build yourself up. Climb on top of the rock. Makes sense.
yeah, yep, yeah. Although I think Drummond's a free agent. Drummond might actually sign somewhat quickly because there's a lot of teams in the league that need a big, and I don't think Drummond's going to cost you a crazy amount.
He
And
just
yeah,
bit
so
for no reason.
he rebounds. He'll at least give you that. There's a lot of teams out here that need rebounding. So he's a guy who probably could go early in free agency as well.
I can name a few off the top of my head that need rebounding.
Yeah. I mean, technically, the Thunder need a big to go behind Chet. I mean, would Drummond go there pretty cheap? You got a team that, won the West yet last year, did get bounced a little early in the playoffs, but it seemed like a stepping stone for them. Could he be a player that could get them back there? Why not? What was it? Anthony brought it like PG to Dallas. What does Dallas do? Dallas has now, tasted the NBA Finals. They come up short. How do they address their roster to try to get back there? Because it's never easy to get back to the finals, especially in a West where a lot of things are changing around them. So they're gonna have to improve their team a certain way as well.
I'm glad they got rid of Tim Hardaway Jr.
Yeah, that definitely seemed like a move that was gonna happen. And for Quentin Grimes, which I remember putting this when I heard that trade. It's like Quentin Grimes, for Knicks fans who, are celebrating Mikal Bridges, Quentin Grimes was the reason that Knicks didn't get Donovan Mitchell. And now, since not pulling the trigger on that move, he was traded to Detroit for Bogdanovich and now traded to Dallas for Tim Hardaway Jr. Kind of wild to think. I guess, well, because I think Donovan Mitchell is somewhat of a free agent as well. And I think a lot of the talk is he's going to re-sign in Cleveland, I guess. Which I think different.
Right. Look, I know my Lakers can't pay him because we already got the second apron, I think.
Yeah.
But
yeah, unless you do sign and trade, and then those get tricky because now you're trying to match salaries and everything. So yeah. Yeah.
Unless it's D'Angelo Russell, Torian Prince. Y'all know I don't like D'Angelo Russell, even though I know he opted into his player. I really hate the fact that he opted in because he wants to give JJ a chance. Boy, get up out here. I'm tired of him. I get all funny and all foo-foo for Darvin Ham, but all of a sudden, you want to give JJ Redick a chance? Shut the hell up. I'm tired of him.
D'Angelo Russell he's an interesting case study. To be honest, I was a fan of his at Ohio State. I thought he was going to be really good. It's just for whatever reason. Well, I mean, I kind of know the reason. He's just a streaky scorer. And it's a league where you have a lot of guys like that. But what that also means is you don't really stick anywhere because you're not all that dependable.
Because you don't play
right. That's the biggest issue. This is a league that's more and more guard dependent and wing dependent. And if you can't guard your position as a guard, then yeah, you don't stick around for too long. There's a good chance D'Angelo Russell just opted in to be a trade deadline move this upcoming season.
Oh, he said he wanted to play with JJ.
That's all well and good, but if they get to trade deadline and they want to make a move and a team
I
actually
would not.
wants D'Angelo
I would,
Russell, they're not going to
that
tell
guy
him no. Right.
can
So
do
he
it.
can say whatever he wants at this point.
I'm not gonna tell. He can't say no, and I'm not gonna tell the Lakers not to do it. Get rid of his ass as soon as you can. The fact that he opted in and hit us with "I want to play for JJ" and give him a chance and all that other crap. You know who was acting foolish with Ham, and all of a sudden now you get a new coach. You want to act right, boy. Oh my lord!
Yeah.
You act
I
like
mean,
a
well,
defense somebody who ain't done nothing. But
part
Chuck
of that could
don't
be
stop the rim.
also Redick is clearly attached to LeBron, and we know with LeBron, if you go against LeBron, you're not staying on his team long enough. So he's probably because he went through that this past season when there was talks of Russell being traded, and because I know you remember, like him crying on the bench or whatever, at least allegedly, at the fact that he could be traded. Like he doesn't want to go through that again this year, even though he probably will end up going through it. But
I hope you
yeah,
do. I play defense and I want to play defense. Shut the hell up. This is the reason why he is the way he is. I can't stand D'Angelo Russell. That's a trigger name for me.
yeah, I'm sure for a lot of teams he's been on. Yeah,
And
well,
this
I mean,
is
look,
second.
D'Angelo Russell seems like a guy who, if you put on a bad team, he'd probably light it up. And then for good teams, it's like you have to be very careful with him. You have to be quick to pull him if he's not making shots because he's not going to give you anything defensively. If he has a game where he's knocking down threes, you live with the defense and you just let him flame out. That's what he is.
This is his second stint with the Lakers. If he gets traded again, do not bring his ass back. Rob.
Hey, Rob. I mean, they showed Rob when he made the Bronny pick. He looked like a very happy man. He's feeling himself right now.
I know. But I need him to make better decisions.
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna be like in focus this year. I mean, we kind of know like with the Lakers, they're always a topic of conversation. So if it doesn't work out early, everybody's gonna be looking at Rob to see what he's gonna do. So yeah, he can't relax right now. Always gotta be working. So Anthony asked which re-signed player was the best move, and I'm trying to think of players that re-signed.
Miami signing Bam.
I don't know how I feel about that move actually. I mean, I get it.
You don't know how to. You're a Celtics fan. You're not gonna know.
I mean, not necessarily that because I like Bam as a player.
He's not a star on his own, and you don't like the
Yes,
franchise he plays for.
allegedly, yes. I mean, that's yeah. Because look, I loved when Pat Riley called out Jimmy Butler. That made my day. So yes, I'm not a. But I mean, the feeling's mutual. Heat fans hate Celtics fans, so it's all good. Me not liking the Heat, it's par for the course. I do think Bam is a good player. It's just that some of these numbers that some of these guys are getting, I'm just like I can't imagine paying like that player that much a season. Because like every time I see a player re-sign, and once again, this is probably the Celtics fan in me. I just think of the reaction to the Jaylen Brown stuff. I'm like, some of these guys aren't making that much less than Jaylen Brown, but I look at Jaylen Brown as a better player. So I think for Bam, for that Heat team, I guess it makes sense because he is the best player that they have. And yes, that's even with Jimmy Butler because I'm not the biggest Jimmy Butler guy. I don't like the way he treats the regular season. I don't like the way he treats some playoff games where he just does nothing for 3 quarters and then tries to make up for it in the fourth. I yeah, Jimmy Butler is a frustrating player to watch. Bam, he kind of is consistent. I do think with the kind of money they're paying him, he better become more of a threat offensively. And I feel like we're probably going to start seeing Bam shooting more threes.
Here
I
we
don't know.
go.
That's kind of the way of the NBA anyway. I mean, he shot a couple like last year, but I feel like he's probably gonna have to start shooting a bit more, especially on that Heat team.
I'm not a Bam fan because he should not have been on the defensive player of the year list over ahead of Anthony Davis. That was a
Yes,
crock of
yes, I agree.
that was just a load of it. Like I'm gonna just keep it at that. And I'm like, what in what? That was a snub? No, that was not a snub. That was highway robbery. And it was BS.
I agree. I agree.
But the Pacers are gonna keep Obi Toppin with a $60 million deal. Let's see, Max Christie will stay with the Lakers.
Yeah, 4-32. Which I mean that like a deal like that used to be kind of normal. 4-32. 4-32 now.
Yeah,
It's like okay, when you got guys signing like 166 for 3 years and stuff like that, 4-32 sounds crazy now. But I'm not like that. He's a young player. He should have a bigger role in the rotation this season, I would think. So yeah, more power to Max Christie.
watch the Magic for Hartenstein and Kentavious Caldwell Pope because he's a free agent too.
Yes,
Watch for
I
the
heard KCP to Orlando. I would love to see KCP in Orlando. If
scrolling
Hartenstein
on my
is there
laptop.
too, Orlando's doing work.
You know, the Bulls also have a Zach LaVine problem. They can't get rid of him. Just cut him.
Mm-hmm.
You can't find a trade partner, and you really don't want the man who can't stay healthy on your roster anyway. Take the lick and cut him. It's not that
NBA teams,
hard.
I mean, NBA teams are afraid to do that though. They don't like cutting players. I agree with you. Levine and DeRozan should be gone. Clearly, they should transition to a Kobe White team because what Kobe White did last year, he kind of showed like he's a piece that you should be building around. Oh wait, the Bulls did re-sign Patrick Williams. I
Yep, for
remember
90
seeing that. I that blew my mind just seeing 90 million next to his name. I know it's over like what 4 or 5 years or something, but he seemed like a guy that Bulls fans and I thought the organization was kind of giving up on because he hasn't been worth the draft pick so far. But once again, if you're telling me that the Bulls next year don't have Levine, don't have DeRozan, then maybe Williams and Kobe White can start to create something in Chicago. Anthony says, "Bye bye, Chris Paul. You had your chance for a ring."
Yep.
Hey, Chris Paul's tried. He has tried. He tried attaching to the Warriors. I mean, the Washington part, obviously no, but he was with the Clippers all those years, and they had those great players. Like he's tried. I don't know where he goes.
The thing is, they need a Chris Paul now in Phoenix.
Yes, they really do.
They can't pay him though. Because you got 3 players making $150 million. Now that's a situation you don't want to be in.
Yeah.
And they just cut him. They just cut Chris Paul.
Well, okay. So now Chris Paul's out there in the free agent pool. I mean I want to know like rumor wise where he where he could even be linked to. Hmm.
He need to hang it
I
up.
mean,
His couch.
he's gonna give it like one last shot or something.
And then he'll see Scott Foster and then he'll just quit. Like they're not getting a ring, bro.
Suns and Bucks are a nightmare. Okay, so Anthony, yes, because the Spurs need a point guard. The Spurs have to get a point guard somewhere. I mean, I wouldn't be mad at that for Wemby because Chris
Have
Paul
the
would
space.
know how to. That would make a lot of sense.
Too much sense.
Yeah, and I'm sure Chris Paul would love to play for Popovich. You know what? I I feel like that needs to happen. Like tomorrow, we should hear like Chris Paul to the Spurs for whatever. Yeah, I
It
mean,
could
look,
happen.
if they, yeah, that'd be better off than trading their draft capital for Trey Young. You bring in Chris Paul. Chris Paul will make Wemby a better player. You know, Keldon Johnson and those guys. I like that, Anthony. Yeah,
When they get
Chris
rid of
Paul to the
social.
Spurs. I think he's still there. Well, at least now Sochan can have a different role. Whatever the next role is for him, yeah, him as a point guard was a disaster.
A bench warmer.
Trey Young was a 1 year wonder. Yes. Harden returned to. Oh God. Well, hey, I'm not a Clippers
That
fan. Good luck with that. Good luck with that.
being middle of the pack and underwhelming.
Harden just, yeah, Harden's never. I mean, look, Harden in Oklahoma City when he was like a sixth man, I was like, okay, I can run with that. But this Harden that got the MVP and thinks like he's legit or something, no. Especially as he gets older, he just becomes less and less relevant for me. 2 years, 70. Well, I guess
Collectively.
only 2 years. So Anthony's saying it's 2 years, 70 million.
So he gets to
Okay.
selectively do the job for 2 more years. Got it. I wish I
Yeah.
could select do my job.
I mean, if I'm a Clippers fan and you brought back Harden, then you might as well just try to bring back Paul George. Give him the fourth year at this point. Like, who cares? Because Kawhi and Harden only, that does not excite me in any way.
But if I am Paul George, I'm taking my ass to where grass is greener. Bye.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. Like, yeah, that's probably the worst thing Paul George wanted to hear. Oh, you're bringing him back? Hey, Daryl Morey, how much you want to give me for Philly? Does anyone want Brooke Lopez? Celtics can have him. We'll take Sam Hauser back in his home state. Well, I do think Hauser might get a new deal. Brad Stevens loves him. Brooke Lopez, because I know
No.
you put, because you put earlier like the Suns and Bucks are in a nightmare situation. Brooke Lopez is a guy that needs to retire. I don't I yeah. If he plays next year, what is he giving you? A year older. He's had his good career.
3-point shooting.
I mean, he is a 3-point shooter, but there's been so many games where I've seen him like shoot their offense to the point where it's unwatchable. Like if he's hitting them, fine. But there are nights where he will be off and it just kills their whole offensive flow. And the last thing you want is Giannis just sitting around watching Brooke Lopez jack up three after three. That doesn't make any sense.
The
And this is
younger
another
and
point.
and
He
faster.
doesn't even rebound. He's 7 foot and doesn't rebound. That's crazy to me.
Yeah,
Zero
he need
post play. Yeah. He was a post player when he was in Brooklyn early in his career, and then he realized he could shoot threes, and then that's what he became, a 3-point shooter.
Is that Lopez brother the one who used to fight all the goddamn mascots?
That's Robin. Robin's a clown. I actually like Robin. But Robin knows who he is. Like Robin, you put him on the block and he does his little half hook. Like Robin Lopez is like Boban. Boban's a guy that if he was on my team, I would just love having Boban around because Boban's just a really fun guy. So yeah. Yeah, Robin's one who used to like beat up the Bulls mascot, and I would just die laughing every time I saw it. Damon Beasley got more boards per game than he did. Yes. Yes, that's talking about the Lopez's. I take Robin back for Brooke. Yeah. I've always liked Robin Lopez. Brooke, not so much. I mean,
in
you said
general.
is he younger?
And faster. The Bucks need to get younger and faster.
Yes. Yeah. Question is, there's a lot of teams that are looking for that. And when you're dealing with Brooke Lopez, you got Middleton who's slowing down. I mean, Dame's still got some quickness to him, but it's basically just Giannis running around a bunch of statues out there trying to find offense. That's not going to work anymore.
Not fast. He just got long ass legs and he got bigger strides.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
It sure
Bucks are
was.
stupid to let Drew Holiday leave.
And as soon as I see he wounded up in Boston, I'm like, they finna win a championship. I called it then. I want all my credit.
You did. You did. You called it. I mean, I was surprised he got there. When they traded him to Portland, Portland's like, we're not going to get him. I had convinced myself Drew Holiday was going to be a Heat player because the Heat struck out on Dame. I was like, it makes perfect sense to go with Dame. And then that report was like, oh, the Heat aren't interested. I was like, are y'all serious? And then he ended up on the Celtics. And then, yeah, I love that move from day one. I mean, I get what like the Bucks wanted the offense of Dame Lillard at the expense of the defense because I feel like they thought defensively they were kind of set. They needed a scorer with Giannis. But yeah, after this past year, it looks like a terrible move. Now, look, the second year, especially knowing that Doc is going to be there, Doc loves veteran players. We'll see if year two of Giannis and Dame is better than year one. I don't know how much you want to bank on that, but we'll see.
I'll give you about $5 on that. I ain't got
I mean,
much.
I wouldn't put money on it either. But for Bucks fans, that's the one thing they have to kind of hope for, that Dame and Giannis look better in their second year. Plus with Doc, whoever you drafted, Doc probably won't know their name for 2 years because he does not like playing rookies at all. John does what Giannis says. That's why we haven't had a consistent head coach turnover. Hence Dame for Drew.
Oh, so he's one of those superstar ass kissers. That's the reason why Giannis turned into a diva. He had the right person. Giannis been able to show my butt and talk about a whole bunch of other BS because Pat Riley would have gave him the Jimmy Butler treatment, which is shut up.
Yeah. Look, when Pat Riley did that, I just loved it so much because that's the kind of stuff I would have said to Jimmy Butler myself. Like Jimmy Butler doesn't play in the playoffs, but he comes out like, "Oh, if I were there, we would have beat the Knicks. We would have beat this team and that team." It's like, why are you saying that now? Pat Riley doesn't care about what ifs. Doc said, like LeBron, he don't like young players playing with him. Yeah. Oh, so yeah, I just got the notification that Golden State frees up $30 million cutting Chris Paul. Okay, that's a good chunk of money.
Talking too much. I'm like, there has got to be a reason why Giannis is showing his ass like this. Because he has never did this. But now I feel like, now I know that the reason why he found a person he could get away with acting like a damn brat with. Yep. And not on his weight around. Because he's not going to do that with somebody like Pat Riley.
But that's how the NBA is built. If you're a small market, you better do what your star player wants, or they'll up and leave. That's definitely one of the bad parts of the NBA. And when Giannis made that switch, I thought Giannis was gonna be the last one to do it, and then he turned on that superstar ego switch, and now it's like I guess that means that his brother's gonna be a buck for life because if Giannis is there, he's gonna be there.
At least
I'm
they get
surprised the rest of them aren't there. They used to have like two of them, and then the other one I don't know where he went, but
he was a Laker. One of them was a Laker, and
that's right. I do remember that. Yeah,
then now he's cut, and he's no longer a Laker. And I forgot after that.
he's probably in the G League somewhere. I know family is important, but hey, that dude's the highest paid cheerleader in the league, so he's doing something right. I mean, look, his brother when he does play in garbage time, he turns into the dude at the Y that taking the pickup game way too seriously. Like they could be up by 40 and he's out there playing like it's game 7 of the finals. I can respect that, but it's just crazy
We'll get
what's
you a
gone on with
in
Giannis
half
recently.
a second. We'll get you a tech in about half a second.
That's that passion, You just letting people know. Yeah, I don't know. It's Milwaukee's gonna. I mean, look, Milwaukee's gonna be looked at next year, even just because of their coaching situation. Phoenix, who we talked about. I cannot wait to see what happens in Phoenix next year. I know Houston. There was a report that Houston wants Booker or KD. Supposedly, Phoenix's owner is like, we're not moving KD, and I think Booker kind of loves it in Phoenix. I'm
Yeah,
not mad at Houston for trying because if I'm Houston and if I could steal Booker away from Phoenix, I guess that would make a lot of sense. But it seems like Phoenix is okay running it back next year with Budenholzer running the show. I'll tell you right now, Phoenix, don't expect a better postseason performance with those three again. Maybe you don't get
especially
swept next
yeah,
year, but you're still not winning anything.
especially with Bradley Beal. And to Bradley
Yeah.
Beal, good luck with Coach Bud because he's not gonna have none of that crap that you put on display in the
Yeah.
playoffs. None of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Bradley Beal, like, get on the court. Just try that. It seemed like whenever he did play last year, he was out 2 games later. So if Phoenix wants to look at it that way and say the three of them didn't play a lot together, I can't be mad at that. But yeah, they definitely need to do better there. We actually
They had
have,
all three of them. They still got swept.
yeah, but I mean, part of that is Beal not playing a lot, and then Beal supposedly supposed to be your point guard. I don't see how that's going to work. I mean, I could probably argue Booker would probably be better at it than Beal, but then if you have Booker as just your straight point guard, that takes away from his offensive ability. So they either needed to find some cheap free agent point guard who's going to come in there for like next to nothing and just do it that way, or I just don't know how they improve next year.
The problem is they built this team like a big ass dummy. Like, come on. You got three players, your highest players, all three of them need the goddamn ball. There's only one basketball, Phoenix, Matt Ishbia.
Mm-hmm.
And y'all don't have the best of ball movement. So once we get like
Yeah.
Velcro ball movement, and can't nobody really do much else other than stand around and look for the ball and da 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 da. Nobody's moving, nobody's setting things up, nobody's doing none of that crap. Of course, you're going to get swept in the first round of the playoffs.
Yes.
And it's going to keep happening as long as you have three ball dominant players being your highest three players on the roster.
Like they built their team completely opposite of how teams are doing it this era of basketball. what teams are doing now is they're establishing a duo and building around the duo. Phoenix was like, no, we're going to go super team with the trios, which was the era that most fans were glad we were out of. And for some reason, Phoenix thought we could revive it and keep it going. But you look around, the teams that win, it's all about ball movement. Like you said, Phoenix has zero ball movement. And as Anthony put, Clay is out. They're working on a sign and trade deal, which, if you're Golden State, that's your best case scenario. Because if you sign and trade him, you at least get something for him. If you just let him walk, then there's nothing to be gained in Klay Thompson leaving. I would like to see who the sign and trade is with.
Thank you,
So if you're a Warriors, like, Chris Paul gone, Klay Thompson gone. Okay. That's probably going to be something that we'll definitely touch on next week because we're a little over 2 hours, which, I mean, look, the way the show's gone, our first episode was an hour. We did like an hour and a half last week. We're up to 2 hours. And, with you and I, we could sit here for like 6 hours and talk and still have a lot to talk about. So I think 2:07 we'll cap this one. So normally, Jory and I are on here for Passion and Precision on Fridays, but this week we had to, push it to Sunday. So next week we should be back on Friday night, 7:00. So make sure you all tune in for that. I mean, Jory, you have anything you want to add before we get out of here? Or I guess before any more NBA news breaks and we find like 15 more minutes to sit on here and talk about?
My phone's finna die.
So yeah, it was a perfect time for us to get out of here. But yeah, we appreciate all of you in the chat for sure. Anthony, Trajan, we had Conman in here. Said, yeah, watch something big happen when the show is over. It's probably going to happen that way, but trust me, anything that happens between, the ending of this show and next Friday, we will definitely touch on. And, you all in the chat, make sure you come back and, you can feed us some topics as well to make sure we stay on with a lot of the news that's going to happen, because we know with the NBA, once the offseason gets kicked off, it can move pretty quickly early on. So for myself and Jory, which make sure you check her out on Jory Sports Stories. For mine, you can see me over on Chomping at the Bit on most social media platforms or Twitter, like Chomping Podcast, as well as some other shows here on the network. So make sure you like and subscribe to Integrity Sports Network as well. Show some love. Like I said, come back next week for another episode of Passion and Precision. Myself and Jory will let you enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your weekend, and we will see you all on Friday. We are out.